From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone. It looks like we've got a terrific crowd. And my name is Betsy Peterson. I'm the director of the American Folklife Center here at the Library of Congress, and I want to welcome you to our latest presentation in our ongoing Benjamin Botkin series. The Botkin series allows the Folklife Center to accomplish a couple of things. Most importantly, allows us to present the latest research and scholarship of leading scholars in folklore, oral history, ethnomusicology, and cultural heritage studies. It also allows us to build our collections and is an important facet of our acquisition activities. And in fact, in the next month or so, this lecture will be put up on our website, so you will be able to revisit it, and it will be available to future generations. So with that in mind, let me remind you, if you have your cell phone on right now, to please turn it off, or you will be in our archive. And then today, I have the special honor of introducing the distinguished sociolinguist, and Yiddish language and cultural scholar, Dr. Miriam Isaacs. Dr. Isaacs is a native Yiddish speaker who grew up listening to Yiddish in her home and in her community and on the radio in Montreal and New York. She's recently retired from the University of Maryland, where her research interests included Yiddish culture and its uses as a tool of empowerment in the displaced persons camps in the immediate aftermath of World War II. She also has been focusing on Yiddish language among Hasidic Jews. She's published on a range of topics, including Yiddish Hasidic children's literature, Yiddish vitality and language choice in multilingual community, and Yiddish in Orthodox communities of Jerusalem. She is a committed educator, and she has taught and organized innumerable conferences and workshops on Yiddish culture, language, and society. And in her spare time, which is very little, I think, she is also a mainstay at such iconic Yiddish events as Klez Camp, the Yiddish Folk Arts Program, yay. And today, it's a special or double honor because Miriam recently received the prestigious fellowship by the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum to research one of our collections, the Ben Stonehill collection of Yiddish folk songs. The unique collection is the subject of today's presentation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Miriam Isaacs for her Botkin lecture on Jewish folk song, Ben Stonehill and the Hotel Marseille, collecting cultural treasures in a post-World War II New York lobby. Miriam?
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. And thank you even more for preserving and making this archive available to me, to the Holocaust Museum, to YIVO, to Yad Vashem. I'm sure it's one of many, many treasures, but to me it's been a joy to have access to. And I have mainly to thank somebody who just walked into the room, Brett Werb, who acquired it for the Holocaust Museum, I believe, a while back, and told me about it. And it's that this is the Botkin lecture, actually is a kind of joke between us, because, all right, there's this collection of songs that was recorded in 1948 on wire reels in the Hotel Marseille on Broadway and 103rd Street by a man named Ben Stonehill. And it's about, I think, 39 hours or so of sound. And it's just sound, except for a list of the first lines of all the songs in variable orthography. And so I've been having the pleasure of being a scholar again and just sitting there listening to the sounds of 1948. And thanks to modern technology, I'm able to pull out tracks from this hotel room sounds, so hotel lobby sounds. And one of the songs I came across when I was at the Holocaust Museum Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies was something that sounded to me like Botkin or Botkin. So I clipped it out on MP3 and I sent it to Brett Werb, who's here, and I said, what is this Botkin song? And he very quickly sent back something from Polish Wikipedia about a man named Botwin. There was a Jew named Botwin who shot a fascist in the 1920s. He was a labor organizer. And because he shot a fascist somewhere in White Russia, he was immediately executed. But he became a kind of folk hero. And a brigade in the Spanish Civil War was named after Mr. Botwin. And so one of the 1,054 songs that I'm archiving, that I'm working with, is Botwin, and maybe we'll have time to hear it. But it's a ballad. It's a ballad about him and how he took out a revolver and shot this fascist. Now, one can imagine why shooting a fascist would be a happy thing to sing about if you're a Holocaust survivor in 1948. Most of the singers that were located in the Hotel Marseille had been in Germany not that long ago in refugee camps and displaced persons camps. And thanks to Jewish rescue organizations, they were being temporarily housed in this hotel, which I visited recently, took some pictures of it, sat down there just to get a feel for what the space was like back in 1948. They had lived through the war. Most of them are quite young, in their 20s. Some are children. You'll hear some of the children's voices. And this one individual, Ben Stonehill, took it upon himself to get hold of some recording equipment. At that time, in 1948, the technology of choice was wire reels. He got hold of these recording equipment, set up a studio in this hotel lobby, and simply set about recording long hours. He gave a talk about his project many years later. He did this project in 1948, and in 1964, when he was aware of the fact that he was dying soon of cancer, he gave a talk at Evo in which he describes what the lobby looked like to him. And there were Jews of every sort from many different countries. Some spoke Polish, some Hungarian, some German, some were bearded rabbis, many children, women coming through the lobby and singing. And singing is restorative. The survivors who had been through the war were not treated to therapy. You know, now we know about post-traumatic shock, but they were as traumatized probably as humans can get, and there was no psychological help. But remarkably and wonderfully, music is very healing, and this gave them an opportunity to express what was in their hearts and to be together. A lot of the songs are happy songs. They're young people in their 20s. They want to meet people of the opposite sex. They sing love songs. Some of the songs are incredibly bawdy. I didn't bring those because who knows? I'll save those for a later lecture. But I tried to bring an assortment of the material that is in the archive. Ben Stonehill offered the archive after he collected it in 1949 to various universities and the Library of Congress. At that time, a lot of these songs had never been recorded anywhere. They were part of a tradition of ballads, lullabies, love songs. Some of the songs date to before the war, some of them were written during the war, some after the war. They express a wide range of narratives, and yet, in 1948, 49, there was not that much interest in this kind of material. Fortunately for us, later in 1964, Stonehill tried again, and this time the Library of Congress took on the Folklife Center, houses it. The Library of Congress took the archive. It was transferred from wire reels to tape. Eventually it was digitized and making it much more accessible, but it's still raw sound. It's the sound of people sitting around a hotel room, which to me makes it much more vital. You hear babies crying, you hear people laughing, you hear horns honking outside. You get a sense of what the social dynamic was in this particular space in 1948. People who were maybe days or weeks or months out of Germany from the DP camps and towns in Germany. So let me play a little bit of some songs for you and explain what they are. They're mostly in Yiddish. I would say 90% of the material is Yiddish. Another perhaps 9% is Hebrew. Hebrew, liturgical Hebrew, as well as some modern Hebrew, and perhaps 1% is Polish, Russian. And some are in a mix of languages. So there was, while many of the people that were singing came from different countries, Yiddish had become the common language in a post-war situation. It was a language in which a Hungarian Jew could communicate with a Polish Jew, could speak to a Russian Jew. So what we have here is a poster of the Hotel Marseille. I think of the archive as a kind of Atlantis, because in 1948, that world had been destroyed. The European, Ashkenazi, Yiddish-speaking world was just gone. There were maybe, a few people scattered here and there, but what had been a living, thriving community of 10 or 11 million people was pretty much gone. And so for the people who wound up in places like this hotel, they were very much aware. It wasn't just personal loss, but a whole world and a whole culture that had disappeared. And what they were busy doing was trying to revive it in wherever they were, be it Australia, Israel, or the Hotel Marseille. So I'm going to play something called Poxy Hein, which is a song sung by a man named Shmerke Kaczerginski, who I'll talk about a little bit more later. He was he was in the Vilna ghetto. He fought with the partisans. He was a collector as well as a singer and writer of songs that are associated with the Holocaust. And this particular song basically tells Jews to pack up. This song was written or composed around the time that Jews were waiting for the Soviets to come in and liberate them from the Nazis. So there was hope was near. So it begins with this message of, Jew, pack up your stuff and go, but then with a kind of hopeful tone in which we're going to tell the enemy soon to pack up. So here. And he's saying who wrote it, Sender Weissman. This is Kaczerginski himself, who died in an airplane crash in 1954, flying, I think, from Argentina. But he was in New York in 1948, having survived a whole war. So this is him speaking, his Lithuanian Yiddish. I know you can't hear it or understand it, but I just want you to hear the tone of his voice. So pack up. Who doesn't know this refrain? It's a well-known song. Every Jew knows this song. Pack up. So, pack up. Nothing will do you no good. Tomorrow they're going to send us off to Riga, which is not a good place to go. There'll be a better ending. They're not going to succeed. We will sing this song to them. You pack up. So fun. This illustration, one of the scholarly things that I did a while back was to write about the newspapers that were published in the displaced persons camps of Germany, Austria, and Italy after the war. And there were some very talented artists who did some drawings. And they were even in the camps, in these displaced persons camps after the war, trying to reclaim their cultural heritage by writing down songs, lyrics and music in this case. And so here you have an image of Jewish partisans in the woods, which was not like camping out. You know, they had no heat or, you know, Bunsen burners or whatever you have when you camp. But they fought the Germans, and so they weren't, I don't know what they do in the camp. so here is a song. All right, so this particular song, let me just play a little bit of it. So it's Kaczynski again. Oh no, this is not. All right, so he learned this song. Somebody named Ponchik learned it. A Jew had come from Chelm in Poland. And this is a religious song sung by religious people. And it's basically speaking to God. The peoples of Europe make a joke of us. So our Creator, how can you look at such things? We never can rest. They're just taking us to the slaughter. So we ask you all the time, help us, the guardian of Israel. Take our tears. All right, so this song was very meaningful to me when I first started working with this archive many years ago in a place called Jerusalem. I was doing research on Hasidic Yiddish, and one of the first schools I went to was a school run by the Belzer Hasidim, and to show off how well they were preserving Yiddish and Yiddish culture, the teacher had the girls in the 10-year-olds sing 2 songs for me, and this was one of those 2 songs. And I've never heard it recorded anywhere else. It is in a book by Shmerke Kaczynski, published in 1948 in New York, with the music and the lyrics, but other than that, I've never seen it anywhere else. And it's quite very moving and very beautiful song. So it's really, you know, exciting material. Here you have another drawing from the DP Camp newspaper. This one was, the newspaper is called Unsere Stimme, and it was in the British zone. And you see here an image of 3 survivors still in their, emaciated, still in their striped, looks like prison outfits with the barbed wire, but basically holding each other up. So again, you know, the psychological importance of art and music. So here we have illustrations of partisans through the woods, illustrations of survivors basically holding each other up after the war. So these songs play an important part. One of the things I realized about these songs, because I love music, but I don't play it. So I'm more attuned to the words than the melodies, but the words themselves are a kind of coded language. Because Yiddish is very similar to German, and during the war, in the camps, and after the war, in the DP camps in Germany, Jews often had to disguise what they were saying, and so there was more of a reliance on the Hebrew-Aramaic part of Yiddish, and also other things that were kind of coded language that would keep themselves safe, but also help each other understand what was going on, what had happened, what was going to happen. And new communities were being created, and a hotel lobby can be that kind of community. In fact, at Kles Camp, where I teach often, there is a man who records and makes a little radio station right in the hotel lobby that we're at Kles Camp in upstate New York. And it's the same kind of thing. People casually walk by, and if they feel like singing, they will, like it or not. And, so, wait, later. Yeah.
If you don't mind, when you play another song, would you mind doing the translation after we're able to hear it? It's hard to hear.
Oh, while I'm doing it, yes.
That's just a
I'll try, yeah. Okay. I'm a compulsive talker, sorry. And I know not everybody here speaks Yiddish. Yeah. So here, this picture is of a DP camp building. It happens to be the DP camp I was born in. I don't know if I was born in this particular building, but you can see the landscaping is a little bit rough. It had actually been barracks for the Luftwaffe before it turned into refugee housing, as it were. And what I decided to do because this material is unwieldy, it's a huge project, I decided that what really needs to happen is it needs to turn into something that's accessible to scholars, to musicians, to performers. And so with a little help from the Koster Foundation, from friends and organizations, I want to make this into something like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a book called Rise Up Singing, but that was my inspiration, to take the songs and organize them thematically. So as I cut tracks out of the long hours of recording, what I do is sort out the tracks by theme. Love songs, songs about orphans, songs of heroism, songs about forced labor, body songs, funny songs, you name it. And then there's a huge category of miscellaneous that seems to catch a lot. Children's songs, a lot of songs about homelessness. That was the first theme that jumped out at me when I looked at the list of songs. These were homeless people. These are people who had been uprooted from their old homes years and years back and had lived in ghettos, had lived in camps, had lived in the woods. Many of them had lived in the Soviet Union and come back to Poland and Europe and made their way to the West. And so homelessness is a very important theme, what it feels like to be homeless. And they still didn't quite know where they were going to be in New York either, or in America. They had just arrived and were still being temporarily housed. So anyway. So these are the themes here. Heroism, Katzet. Katzet is concentration camp. Lost youth and old age. A lot of philosophizing goes on in these songs. Okay. So this is a dining hall in the Leipheim DP camp. This is, my mother is not in this picture, but that's where they ate, the communal dining hall. Probably a lot of cabbage. Let's see. I was 2 when I left, so I don't remember anything. I want to talk a little bit about the role of collecting and collection in connection to this archive, because this is a picture I took at Kles Camp a number of years back. I call it Les Grandes Dames de Yiddish, the great dames of Yiddish. I'm not one of them, but to the left here you have Bela Schechter-Gottesman, who is a survivor, a poet, won a National Heritage Award. Some of her poetry has been set to music. And then we have Chava Rosenfarb, who is a novelist and short story writer. And then next to her in the blue sweater is an important figure in Jewish music who's just passed away very recently, Chana Mlotek, that she and her husband were instrumental in preserving a lot of these songs. And then next to her is Goldie Morgenthaler, who is the translator for her mother, Chava Rosenfarb. So I think the importance of women as well as men in terms of preservation and singing and recording singing is important, but also in a larger framework from the time of Ansky, one of the first collectors of Jewish folklore, to today. There's a continuum of preservation of oral tradition that I want to mention briefly. Here's Ben Stonehill himself. He had been born in Poland as a child, moved to Rochester, New York, and then to New York City. In 1929, he moved to New York City and became a salesman of flooring. Is here with his 2 sons. And he lived in Sunnyside, Queens, founded a Jewish school in Sunnyside, Queens that met on Saturday mornings teaching about Jewish culture, about Yiddish culture, rather than a synagogue. So these are secularist Jewish tradition. And he was very active in YIVO and the Workmen's Circle, organizations that were devoted to preserving Yiddish. So he did this on his own. He dragged this equipment from Queens to Manhattan and set it up and spent long hours recording all this wonderful material. And what I have here is an excerpt of him explaining to a child how a microphone works.
Auch reden sei ich. Und alles Ding, was kommt da ist von meinem Mäuel, geht da rein im Mikrofon, geht da rein auf den Draht, magnetisch auf den Draht. Jetzt als ich will es zurückspielen, bis der Herr meine Stimme rauskommt von dem Räder. Jetzt lass mal sagen, was ist dein Name?
All right, so this is him basically explaining to somebody who'd never seen a microphone before exactly what was going to happen, that his voice would go onto this wire, and then it would be recorded magnetically, and then it would come back out. So for a lot of people children who had been in hiding, who had very little experience with the world, that was a great and wonderful thing. And it is a great and wonderful thing. Along with singing, reading, and writing, during the war, most Jews didn't have access to news, didn't know what was going on around the world, didn't have access to radio or newspapers. So to be able to not only have newspapers, but to write your own newspapers so that you can tell the news the way you see it. So here we have a picture again from Leipheim DP camp of survivors, no longer in their striped garb, but well-dressed, and having babies like crazy. The fertility rate in the DP camps was, I think then, the highest in the world. It was ultimate revenge against Hitler. We're just going to have as many children as we can have, and they'll all be Jewish. And so this newspaper is available at YIVO and at the Holocaust Museum. It's been microfilmed, and I looked through it. I actually found a picture of my father in one of the pages of this newspaper called a Heim, which means a home. So Leipheim, it's a town in Bavaria. It's one of those scenic little places. And so it was a temporary home, one that they really didn't want to stay in very long. But there we are, publishing. There were performers, actresses, actors, talented people who performed theater and music in the ghettos. Sometimes the Germans forced them to perform. Sometimes they did it just to keep their spirits up. There's a lot of really, really interesting and important material. One of the recordings I listened to recently, a man was saying that there was a German song that they were forced to sing in Buchenwald. And I looked it up, and there it appeared on YouTube. It's called Drei Lilien, 3 Lilies. When I looked it up on YouTube, if you want to find Nazis, look under Drei Lilien on YouTube, and you'll see what's out there. You may not want to.
Oh Seigneur, komm Seigneur mit mir still und Kabarett. Ranzen bitte, Wein ist süß, und das Leben ist abwärts blasé. Si, si, yo, 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 si, 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 yo, 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 si, si. Señorita, señorita, nicht kann es das doch in Harte, Mutter, Appetita, ehrlich ist es was, ich kann es nicht, kann Butter, da, 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 da. Und das ist deine Seite, si, si, yo, 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 si, si. Ich hab das Lied lag gesungen, das ist war ich schon sehen, das ist hier, was ich verstanden, nicht zu nahe zu verstehen, si, si, yo, 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 si, si.
This is a 10-year-old girl who is singing a cabaret song, partly in Spanish and mostly in Yiddish. very fast. And part of what makes this archive so vital to me is all the little mistakes, people helping each other with lyrics if they forget it, the little la 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 if you don't remember all the words. So this is a cabaret song.
George Gibson. Als ze getanzt im Lambeth-Bock, in einem Tanz, im neuen Krog, dem Klapp in der Knie, und geschreit hat sie, hopp, heim, etche Beja, tanzen ein in Eia, und dem Mime Rose, abgeht wie a Kose, da-na-ni-ni-ni-na-nam, da-da-dam, da-na-ni-ni-ni-na-na-na-dam, da-na-na-ni-na, da-na-ni-ni-ni-na-na-nam, dam.
Okay, so that's the Lambeth Walk. So, let me just make this smaller here. What was that about? All right, so in England, I think the 1920s, there was a popular kind of song called the Lambeth Walk. So this again, I brought this to Brett's attention, and he pointed out that if you go on YouTube, you can see the Hitler or Schicklgruber Lambeth Walk, which shows real footage. 1941, a British man took real footage of Hitler and Nazis goose-stepping and set it and cut and clipped it to the Lambeth tune, which is, you can plot laughing, but so this is a Yiddish Lambeth Walk. I think I've memorized it, but I'll spare you and won't sing it to you. But it's about, did you see the Lambeth Walk? The latest style. You clap your knee and you give a little whoop and you say, oh, there's my auntie hopping here and there, and my uncle dancing around, my aunt dancing like a goat, and my uncle hopping around. So it's an example of, cheering up. A lot of cheering up needed to happen in those years, and people just going on with life, really, and just being happy. This is one of my favorites, too. This is, let me start on a more somber note. Choch means though. Again, I have no home. Too loud? I don't know how. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, despite everything I'm living, oh, I'm sorry. And you can hear the kids in the background adding to that. That wasn't in the lobby. So, much to be said about this particular song. First of all, he's got a beautiful voice, and it's a very Jewish melody. It's very traditionally Jewish, minor chords, and the message is such a mixed message because it means though I have no voice, I have no hands, I have no feet, I have no voice, but I still dance and I still sing and I still go on. And then this repetition of Azayorov meine Sonim. So I don't know how to translate. Azayorov meine Sonim. May my enemies have conditions like this, not us, you know. Azayorov meine Sonim. So, and then it ends with this very strident, despite all these things, I am alive. And that's the ultimate victory. In 1948, for a Jew out of Europe to be alive is enough, you know? And so this song, as melancholy as it is such an affirmation. Let me play a Hebrew one for you. As I said, many of the songs are Hebrew, some are religious. There's a wonderful Chad Gadya that I don't have time to play here, but this is a happy one about when the Messiah comes to Tel Aviv. You didn't know that, did you? Some people think he's going to Jerusalem.
Simona Rabotai, Atunaozen, Matai, Mashiach, Tel Aviv Yavo, Matai, Mashiach, Tel Aviv Yavo, Sekol HaChalutzim, Yanniku Tvilim, Ubirchavot Tel Aviv, Yisveru Shabbat. Azai Ben Gurion Yitzay B'macho, ay, 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 Be'achraf Katzenelson, ay, 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 ay. Azai Mashiach Le'Tel Aviv Yavo, Azai Mashiach Le'Tel Aviv Yavo.
So in the summer of 1948, Israel had just come into existence, you know, a couple of months before, but many of the survivors didn't wind up going to Israel, but dreamed of Israel, were hopeful about a creation of a Jewish state, were amazed at the idea of it. A lot of the songs that are Zionist are pre-war Zionist songs. Some are written during the war. There's a lot of politics kicking around in there. If you look at the DP Camp newspapers, some are very left, some are right, some are in the middle. There were all these factions. They were socialists, they were anti-socialists, they were communists, they were anti-communists. And some of the music reflects that. So a lot of the sort of songs about heroes and fighters tend to come out of the more left-wing sources, but they also will come out of very Zionist, sort of Jabotinsky sources as well. This one is more lighthearted. It's simply how wonderful it'll be. We'll have streets named after Jewish heroes, and the Messiah will show up in Tel Aviv. There it is. I can't explain how it got there. It just did. Oh, so speaking of politics, here's a little song about Hitler, Chamberlain, Stalin, and Mussolini. Never appeared together in a song before. Oh no, whoops, sorry. I hit the wrong button.
Das ist der Monolog von 1939, von
Monologue of 1939.
Chamberlain. Geschrieben hat es Discover Truman. Ja. Hitler. Heint der Vorschlag morgen euch, ich hab Projekte nach Filmboyer. Mussolini. Heint bin ich freilich, was nachher sie fax, ich kenne sie fies davor mit der Axt. Chamberlain. Heint London morgen rein, ich führe der Meulenbude rein. Stalin. Weil der Hitler, die bis zu der Macht gekommen, hast du gebraucht anzumachen, der Schimmel, und wir haben also auch alles bei Schimmel. Thank you.
How to even begin to translate that one? But it's a monologue from 1939, and it begins with Hitler. And it's interesting, in the background, when he says Hitler, somebody in the background says, Yimach Shemo, may his name be obliterated. You know, so it kind of sets the tone. And then it basically criticizes all four of them in very strong terms. Let's see, what have I got? Oh, yeah. Okay. This is a little 10-year-old girl. She had been in the Medem Sanatorium in Poland, so she was an orphan.
Wir sind wie Tegelachbreie, wir sind wie Blumenlöch im Feld, wir sind haben euch getreue, von Kinder von Jakob gezeigt, wir schwören zu halten dem Teuro, zu hüten dem einzigen Gott, wir sind haben euch getreue, von Kinder von Jakob gezeigt, wir schwören zu dienen dem Teuro, zu hüten dem einzigen Gott, wir sind haben euch getreue, von Kinder von Jakob gezeigt.
We're like free birds. We're loyal friends to each other. We're the children of Jacob's tent. It's a very beautiful little song. She sings a bunch of songs, this little girl, and some of the children's material is very moving. And some of the things have been recorded, many have not. Every time I encounter a new song, I have to research it, and luckily now there are quite a few collections and online archives. Some of the songs are variants of songs that maybe exist only in one other place, may have same refrain but different stanzas. We have very little information. When Stonehill records, sometimes he asks people their names, and sometimes they tell him, and when they do, I write it down and try to find people who were in the lobby of the Marseille Hotel in 1948. I recently talked to somebody who lived down the block then and was about 12 and never went in, but said his parents were there. So, one last song. This is by a little boy, Yaakov Gross, who does give his name. He sings a bunch of songs, actually. He's 12. And this is a traditional kind of alphabet song, the way kids traditionally would take the alphabet and just play with it.
Ja, fein. Ja. Was geht zu singen?
Alles Bier Gimmel.
Fein.
Alles Bier Gimmel, wir einfach du zusammen. Alles Bier Gimmel, wir einfach du zusammen. Alles ist ein Udler, Beis ist ein Baum. Gimmel is a galoch, wir einfach du zusammen. Der Uder flieht, der Baum blüht, der Galoch kniet. Dalle Teune, wo wir einfach du zusammen. Dalle Teune, wo wir einfach du zusammen. Dalle diese Doktor, hey, ist der Himmel, wo wie der Wasser, wir einfach du zusammen. Doktor, es gibt zu schwitzen, der Himmel tut blüten, der Wasser tut spritzen. So in Chesed, wir einfach du zusammen. So in Chesed, wir einfach du zusammen. So in diese Säcke mit Geld, Chet diese Chasen, Tet diese Tula, wir einfach du zusammen. Die Säcke mit Geld, tut Kli mit den diese Chasen, singen, die Tula soll zerspringen, wir einfach du zusammen.
So this alphabet song, it's really funny actually, but it's basically, I won't translate it, but each letter of the alphabet has a word. Aleph is an odler, an eagle, Beis is a baum, a tree, Gimel is a galach. Galach is a priest. And, what does, so what does an odler do? He flies, a bomb is blossoming. What does the galach do? He kneels. So these are real cultural treasures, you really sort of, and sometimes they're humorous, sometimes more serious. There are quite a few of these sorts of things that you can find. Another person who recently passed away, Dov Noy, a folklorist, collected a whole lot of these things, and I found some of these material in an old YIVO volume that actually Dov had given me back in 1980-something, and luckily I kept it and have it as a resource. So this is an amazing treasure trove of actual sound. These are the dialects. These are the actual dialects that people from Munkach and Varshe and Lodz spoke Yiddish in, many dialects of Yiddish, and other languages as well. And I want to really thank the Library of Congress for keeping this and making this available to us. And my effort now is to make it more available and accessible to all of you. So on that note, I'll stop and take questions. No questions. You'll make me sing. All right.
On one of the slides, it mentioned Ruth Rubin.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Actually, I was just watching a video of Ruth Rubin on VHS, believe it or not, that was made in the 1980s. And Ruth Rubin, this collection is not the only collection out there. And one of the people that works on this material and has for a long time is a man named Lawrence Glamberg, who sings with the Klezmatics, who are going to be here soon, the 23rd, Saturday. So Ruth Rubin, a lot of her material has been recorded. She recorded herself. She wrote books. There are books about the material, and yet still there's a whole lot out there, because this was a really vital, diverse culture, and these only represent a tiny thimbleful of what's available, of all kinds of material, mother-daughter songs, love songs, lullabies, great stuff. It's a joy to work with it. Sometimes I just get hours go by, I'm sitting there with earphones on. I was sitting there at the Holocaust Museum, everybody's looking at pictures of dead bodies, and I'm giggling. Why? Because the Lambeth Walk just came on. So does that answer your, yeah. So she was a fellow Canadian, and did a lot of recording, put out something called A Folk Life, and University of New Mexico Press has recently, not that recently, put out a collection of her songs.
I just want to ask one more thing.
Sure.
Did she cherry pick? Because on the recordings of her collection,
Right.
they're all fabulous singers, and I can't believe she's that lucky.
She probably did. I find it easier to listen to good voices than bad ones. So she might have done the same. But I do listen to some of the bad ones, and after a while I get to like them because they're telling me things. Just this morning I was listening to a song about Treblinka, for example. It wasn't a joyful thing to listen to, but it's there. It's important. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious who the puller was at the Library of Congress who helped get it here. Was it
Yes. Yeah, actually the correspondence is so moving. When I came here and pulled out the files and started reading, there were these handwritten letters written by Stonehill, saying, I know I'm dying of malignant cancer, and then the logistics of getting the materials to the library, because he was sick and it had to be transferred onto tapes. There's the story of that itself and she was sick, I think, for a while. So he was so grateful finally that it would be available. He himself had wanted to write a book. He had a name for it. It was going to be The Legend of a Yiddish Ballad Collector. But he was aware of the tremendous amount of time and energy that goes into transcribing, translating, annotating, making something like that happen. And he was a working man with kids, so he couldn't do it himself and could, at the time, find no takers. Later, as an anniversary to the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto, Chaim Lotek and others put out a volume of Holocaust songs that includes some of Kaczynski's songs. Kaczynski published, but it was in Yiddish. And so for people who knew Yiddish, they had access to some of this material. For people who didn't know Yiddish, no. Yeah. Yeah.
Did he ever meet with like Pete Seeger or Alan Lomax?
I would doubt it. I don't know. I've spoken to one of his sons, but I couldn't, I think basically he just lived like a normal, quiet life in Queens and did his thing. But the people that were there, like Kaczynski, I mean, when I was listening to this and all of a sudden there is Kaczynski himself singing these songs, I just went wild. And then there's a woman named Diana Blumenfeld who was, she was in the Warsaw Ghetto. She was an actress before the war, married to a famous Polish-Jewish actor named Tarnow, I think so, Turkov. And she was well known before the war, sang in the Warsaw Ghetto, probably in the cabaret or theater, survived the war, and is in this archive. And also he has some bits of sort of radio clips. There's a guy named Moshe Schwimmel who was being recorded on the radio at that time. I sent it to my colleague Henry Sapoznik a couple of days ago, and apparently the radio personality recording him was a guy named Zvi Schooler. So these are just little bits of stuff, that's all on this. It's like finding like a huge attic full of stuff, and then what do you do with it? People like me love that. Yeah. I can't really tell, but I'm thinking it was all at the Hotel Marseille, but I don't know that for a fact. The Shalom Aleichem house in the Bronx is still gathering stuff. It's a Gottesman, has events there regularly and brings in singers and has performers and speakers, and I think they're now podcast and archived and wonderful things. So, and he has this, there's something called a Yiddish Song of the Week, I believe it is, that's online. So, yeah. Other questions? Complaints? Yeah, oh, complaint, good. Yes. I don't know much, but I've thought about him a lot because of what he represents. Because what he did at that time and in that place, in a way, because represents an interesting intersection of cultures. Hasia Diner wrote a book about, some people say that American Jews didn't really want to have much to do with the survivors, that they were ignored. And she argues that wasn't so. And I think it was partially so. A lot of Americanized Jews didn't want to have much to do with survivors. They didn't speak the same language, they were maybe embarrassed by them, saw them as needy, saw them as impoverished, saw them as annoying, I don't know what. But there were Yiddishists, there were people who valued Eastern European Jewish culture, maybe because they had not that long ago come out of Eastern Europe themselves, who were very active in organizations like the workmen's circles or in certain synagogues or in certain contexts, which brought them closer and so, to the survivors. One of the things that Ruth Rubin said on this video I was watching of her the other night is, and this is in the early 1950s that she was doing this, maybe late 40s, is telling people you had to go there. You had to be with the people. You had to listen to them. It's not enough to just send a check or pack a box of goodies and have done with it. She actually went and spent time with the people who had survived, and very few people did. But the people that did were either people with organizations. I haven't read this yet, but there's a new book out, I've been told, called Case Closed, about social workers who worked with the survivors right after the war, and basically, sort of did what they had to do and finished, And then, but these were very traumatized people with lots of needs that didn't just end in 6 months or a year or whatever, organizational time frames gave them to come back to life. So, yeah, I don't know, does that answer your question? I think I lost track, yeah.
Have you come across anything from the Latino community?
No, not a bit. That's simply because I think of the history. It's a different group. It's a different. Part of what I've thought about, besides Stonehill himself and his closeness to these Jewish organizations, is also who got to be in New York in 1948. My family was still in Germany in the summer of 1948. We could not get a visa to come to the United States. We didn't get to the United States until 1960. Well into the 1950s, Jews were still sitting in Germany. People who had sponsors, people who had relatives, or who came from countries with quotas that weren't so high, got to get to New York, because that was a plum thing then. There weren't that many. So amongst the people from Northern Africa, they probably had a different migratory history. I'm sure they did. Yeah. One more question. Yes. Oops. Uh-oh. Can we do two? All right.
It's an information question.
Sure.
Like you, I lived in Didi a few years old, and I actually remember my school. So as a result, I speak Yiddish. Yiddish is my native tongue. I speak a little bit of Russian, and I speak some Hebrew. And I'm very much interested in this music, music of the Holocaust, my question is there a website? For example, let me juxtapose it. I love Russian music. There is a communist website, literally a communist website, that is a treasure trove. And you can go there, and they have tons of music from the communist period, from the Soviet Union, about Che Guevara in Spanish, mostly in Russian. And you can download it.
Yeah.
Is there, and I suspect there isn't, I know there are different sites for Yiddish music, is there a website where this kind of stuff that Stonehill did, and I think it was a sacred mission that he engaged in, can be placed so that one can go to one source? I know one can find stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
Some of it good, some of it quite bad.
The answer is no. There are bits and pieces here and there. Ort has some songs. Yad Vashem has some songs. The Holocaust Museum has a website right here. You can inquire. But all in one place.
Brandeis have a
Brandeis.
whole center and a series.
Dartmouth has something. University of Pennsylvania.
There are 3 sites that are just about Holocaust music, specifically the Yiddish songs.
He's the guy who knows, yeah.
One is the Holocaust Museum site. One is at the Holocaust Museum, ushmm.org, and then you can just look for music.
Holocaust Museum.
Include
Yeah.
some statement about Stonehill and just 1 or 2 selections from this gigantic collection we were going through. Ort in London has also a huge site, much larger, much more detailed, with dedicated essays about the composers and about the context. And Yad Vashem has also begun a site that's all about their collections, which are also quite
Right, so those are the best, really. And then you'll find other things here and there. And University of Pennsylvania has not a sound archive, but a library devoted to Jewish music. Yeah, last question. Yes, yes. Thank you for reminding me about that, because yes, that's why I took this on, actually. My mother used to sing without any melody. She had no ear for melodies. So all songs had the same melody. But she sang to pass the time while she was scrubbing floors and doing cooking and stuff like that. And some of them were quite sad. And some of them I had never seen anywhere else before. One of them is Was I Born from a Stone? Sie bin ich von Stein geboren. And I later found out that this had been actually a theater song. Was I born from a stone? Did no mother ever have me? Is the world... the term Hevel HaVolim comes up a lot. Is the world all chaos? Often you find songs, there are two little refrains that come up a lot. Die ganze Welt ist nur wie Cholim, alles ist Hevel HaVolim. The whole world is like a dream, everything is chaos. And for Jews, order is really important, so that we don't want chaos. And the other one is we're going to drive them back from Berlin to Budapest. This is this sort of militaristic song that we're going to get back at them. We're going to get revenge. So those two things come up a lot. But for my mother's, there was that song, and then there was a song that really annoyed me when I was a kid because it was a German marching song. Wenn die Soldaten auf die Straße marschieren, öffnen die Mädchen die Fenster und die Tieren rara. She had been in Ravensbrück, in this forced labor camp for women. And I'm sure the Germans, as they were marching by, were cheering themselves up. And there it was, kind of stuck in her head. And, so that taught me a lot about the world. You're stuck with somebody else's music sometimes. Especially if the car is going by in D.C. with the loud stuff. Oh, my gosh. All right, I want to thank everybody for coming out on such a cold day. And thank you, Nancy, for arranging this.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.